Morning, everybody. Happy hump day and welcome to the news agenda with me, Fleet Street Fox. And today I'm joined by the Mirror's Defence Editor, Chris Hughes. Morning, Chris.
Morning, Susie. How are you?
Fine, thank you very much. Now, this is the People's Paper Review, so get into the comments, ask us your questions. We'll do our best to answer them for you. Chris has a lot of expertise in all the stuff we're talking about today, so exploit him while he's here. Those of you listening on podcast are just going to have to get that tin hat on and hunker down. So what have we got for you today? Well, the Mirror has splashed on Labour Party anger about Keir Starmer's refusal to back down on the cut to winter fuel allowance, which activists blame on the poor showing at the local elections last week. There's more on that in the paper, but inside, I'm afraid, it's a bit worse than that, the news. And I don't know if the gods of war are paying attention to the guest rota for the news agenda or what. But on the eve of Chris coming on the show, there's just an awful lot of global conflict that seems to have broken out to discuss. First off, we need to go to Pakistan, which overnight has had missiles fired at it by India in the latest spat in a long dispute over the area of Kashmir. Now, Chris, lots of people might not be aware of this, but Pakistan is majority Islamic, India is majority Hindu, and they both have got nuclear weapons, which is nice. Peace is very much what everyone would really like ideally here. So why are they fighting again? What's kicked this off?
Well, it goes back, Susie, to I think it was April the 22nd when terrorists in the Indian-controlled part of Kashmir, disputed Kashmir between the two, killed a large number of tourists, mostly of whom were Indian. Fairly immediately, India accused Pakistan of complicity. The chief suspect for this attack, which is pretty horrific, is a group called Lashkar-e-Taiba, who are Pakistani and have long campaigned for Pakistani hegemony, power over the entire Kashmir region. They've been around for a long time, and they briefly claimed responsibility for that attack and then rescinded that responsibility. And the degree to which, Pakistan says it knew nothing about the attack, and India's response to that attack was last night. And because of the cross-border missile exchanges, I think something like 26 people died and up to 48 were injured. India claims it targeted 9 terror sites within the Pakistan-controlled part of Kashmir and on Pakistani mainland. And Pakistan responded immediately, watching the TV last night, with claims that it had downed 3 and then 5 Indian fighter jets, 2 of them French-made Rafales, which are quite sophisticated. So that's a big deal. Whether it's true or not, we don't know. I've just seen that there is more evidence that at least several Indian fighter jets were downed. India claims if they were downed, that they were shot at over Indian territory, and there is now lots of can you say bellicosity? Lots of accusations, cross-border accusations, and we're waiting. I guess we're waiting to see what response. I think the pressure is on now Pakistan, or it feels more pressure to respond. India feels like it's been aggressive enough and the key to all of this is how much, if anything, did Pakistan know about the attack before it happened? Because we have to be careful how we say this, but over decades and decades, Pakistan has freely admitted in the past involvement with at least controlling terror groups. It was very involved in the Pakistan Taliban, who are a little bit culturally different than the Afghan Taliban. Peshawar was a hub for Al-Qaeda in bin Laden's days, and ISIS is all over the region now, including apparently even India, which is bizarre given they're a Sunni Muslim extremist group. So yeah, as you say, Susie, culturally, religiously, there is enmity between the two since the partition in 47. There have been flare-ups in the past 3 wars, lots of cross-border missile exchanges. I feel that Pakistan will be, all eyes are on Pakistan now, because there's a sense from people I've spoken to this morning that it may feel under pressure to prove that it was non-complicit in the April attacks by being overly aggressive in return, and it's lost less people. Sorry, no, that's not true. Its response hasn't been demonstrated on TV yet. So these fighter jets haven't been filmed being shot down. So do you know what I mean? It's all
it doesn't look like it's been strong enough in return. So we've got this, it's a complete mess. Let's try and sum up. So the terror group, which I'm not going to try and repeat the name of, first said they did it, then said that they didn't do it. India's accused Pakistan of either doing it or knowing about it. Pakistan says, no, we didn't. India's smacked Pakistan quite thoroughly, and Pakistan needs to smack them back for peace to break out. But there seems to have been some smacking, but no one's seen the smacking. So there is no peace as yet. One of the things which has kept India and Pakistan largely well behaved has been international pressure, isn't it, over the period that we've been speaking about this, over the years since 47. The UK has just signed a trade deal with India. Narendra Modi, their leader, has just been a guest of Donald Trump at the White House. Is India being emboldened in any way? Because, you know, Pakistan, or is this kind of conflict, I suppose, being emboldened? Because both sides are not of equal value to world powers.
It does seem like a very, very aggressive response to a suspicion. Now, they say it's more than a suspicion, that they've got that they know that Pakistan was involved. Now, you know, knowing about something happening, as we all know in Britain, is actually taking part in the crime. But in that region, there are more smoke and mirrors when geopolitics is concerned. So it's possible somebody within the intelligence community in Pakistan may have known, but India's kind of suggesting that it was sponsored by, that the attack was sponsored by Pakistan. So yeah, and you would expect them to do something. I think the missile firings is being read as very, very overly aggressive and quite a strong response. So there may be something in that deals with Trump, their position in the world. They've been talking a lot to our Foreign Office and the government, and I think that perhaps they do. And this is there's a sense that Pakistan is slightly marginalised by all of this. So yeah, it's entirely possible. But as I say, we've got to see what Pakistan does about it now.
Yeah. Another argument, as I've often said, that everyone should get a vote in the US elections. Not just America, because they're not very good at choosing their leader. Anyway, if you've got any questions about Pakistan or India, or you know anything more than we do, please get into the comments and let us know. But on now to the war in Gaza, where I think, Chris, it's fair to say most people could be forgiven for thinking that this was coming to a sort of a fairly unsteady, shaky peace. October the 7th happened. Israel flattened everything in Gaza in response. Aid was going in. There wasn't really much more you could do to make Gaza a complete mess. And Trump said he was going to turn it into a beach resort last we heard. So what's happening now?
In the background, so for months and months, there were frantic talks in Qatar with Mossad, Shin Bet, the CIA, diplomats, Taliban, Hamas intermediaries, and people who live there who are members of Hamas, talking constantly about the intricacies of a possible peace deal. There was a peace deal that lasted for some weeks in phase one of a peace deal. Phase two, we never got to phase two, because midway in phase one, they were supposed to negotiate phase two, which would involve further hostage releases and prisoner releases from Israel. This never happened. So a few days after phase one ended, Israel then escalated by launching attacks. There have been missile exchanges. Sorry, Hamas and PIJ, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, have launched missiles to little avail at Israel. So it's all off again. There is a desperate humanitarian situation in Gaza now. The blockade has been going, the aid blockade, that means water, food, medical stuff, shelter is banned. There are 3,000 aid lorries filled to the brim with food and all of the aforementioned stuff that Gazans need. And there are reports from within Gaza that people are dying of starvation. And as we have reported, direct from the ground, Save the Children very kindly recently gave us a testimony from two or three mothers who are talking about their children in severe at risk from starving and the difficulties therein, such as inflation. Bizarrely, that's something you worry about when you're facing death by starvation. A tomato costs, I think, $10, and mothers are sharing it with their 5 children if they can, and it's absolutely horrendous. There are 500,000 tons of solid waste on the streets because the power's all gone, the sewage is going. Sorry, the sewage system's going. Gaza could go dark within days. It's claimed if fuel doesn't arrive soon. And look at where people are living. Looking at these overlays that you're putting out there, Susie, it's just horrific. Now, so the latest is that Netanyahu says that they're going in even further, and Defense Minister recently announced that tens of thousands of troops will be recalled up, reservists. There are reports that this is up to 60,000 Israeli soldiers, probably exhausted from war in Lebanon and Gaza already, going in, and that they will, that Israel has, the Security Cabinet has supported the idea of taking over the whole of Gaza, which will mean that hundreds of thousands will have to move back south to Rafah, which is, a large, many football pitches of rubble, and try and eke out a living there. Already exhausted, humiliated, suffering the indignity of starvation and lack of clean facilities. The evidence from within Gaza would suggest that these people they're within. There are reports now that the hospitals are within days of total collapse. There are things like people being operated on without anaesthetic, which is a horrific idea, and the thought of it. And on a daily basis, I'm going to be fair. At least 10 to 20 people are being killed by Israeli airstrikes, including women and children. We don't know how many of them, if any, are armed fighters, Hamas fighters, but there were some photographs of some Hamas giving themselves up yesterday. The latest, there is more. It was hoped that out of some 59 hostages still being held in tunnels throughout Gaza, that 24 were still alive. Sadly, Israel said late last night that it's now feared that only 21 are still alive. And Netanyahu is under huge pressure from not just the loved ones of those still living hostages and still dead who they want to bury, to relax his war, do a deal, get the hostages out. And commentators like, I forgot his name now, but there's a guy who keeps saying, months ago, these people could have been released. There would be painful concessions that the Israelis would have to make to Hamas. Hamas are refusing to put down their weapons as part of any peace talks previously, and Netanyahu doesn't want to end the war. It's alleged by all the campaigners against him that he wants to maintain his political career. He's facing all sorts of he's facing a corruption trial in the background, and also claims by the ICC, the International Criminal Court, that he should be arrested for war crimes, along with his former defense minister, whose name I've forgotten, sorry.
Right, crikey, you remembered enough in there. And how do you feel about all this, everybody? We all watched the footage of Gaza being destroyed. We've all seen the horrific images and testimonies as well of October the 7th, which was another abomination. The fact is that you'd have thought this conflict cannot keep going. There has to come a point where you run out of people to kill on both sides eventually, but we don't seem to be there yet. Steve says, where does the UK sit if the conflict between India and Pakistan were to escalate, we have got some footage, I think, actually, of some jet fragments which have been found this morning, which may give some oh, okay, we did have it, but we haven't got it anymore. But there's possibly some jet fragments have been found, which may sort of support Pakistan's claim to have shot down some Indian fighter jets. Of course, what side of the border those fragments are on, or whether they've been moved or carried somewhere.
Lead fragments, yeah.
Yeah, how big the fragments are will make a huge difference. But I suppose the trade deal, Chris, means that we take India's side. There we go, jet fragments. Thank you, Will.
They're no longer alleged. They're actual fragments, aren't they?
Yeah.
But where are they? Are they?
Well, this is the thing. Exactly where they are, whether it's India or Pakistan, and how much of the rest of the jet exists or is nearby, and how big the hole in the ground is, I think would be the thing.
Where does the UK sit? I'm going to say on the fence, but leaning towards India. Look, I think the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, will be, obviously he's going to have to call for restraint, as the UN has. That's always done. But I would imagine that in the background, he will be briefed that out of the two, India, trade-wise, politically, lean towards them, but Pakistan is immensely useful in terms of understanding the sort of terror problem in the region, not just because of the claims that they've had that the ISI have had links to the various groups, but also because they would be immensely helpful in understanding. Look, if ISIS in the Khorasan, that's the biggest threat to Britain from extremist militancy in the region. If they get a foothold in Afghanistan again, and let's face it, they have, and Syria, and northern, and the tribal regions of Pakistan, they will feel at will to plot another 9/11 style atrocity along with Al Qaeda. They have the patience and the ability to do it, as proven with various plots that have been smashed by MI5 in the past. Britain is vulnerable because we're seen, despite Trump's presence, as the kind of junior partner to American adventures abroad in places like Afghanistan and Iraq, which is true. And we know that in places like Syria, I've interviewed Iraqi special forces before about this. There have been solid plans exposed to attack identified religious sites in Britain. Now, we've been asked not to go into detail. This was last year, but you can imagine if ISIS gets a further foothold in Pakistan, the trade routes between all of those countries, aforementioned countries, mean that there's an immense amount of weaponry left by America to the Taliban, most of which was then sold in gun and bomb and explosives markets in places like Quetta in Pakistan, which is Al Qaeda and gun dealing for terrorism central. Once they have a foothold in places like that, they will be able to radicalize at will Brits over here who are tempted to join their campaign and attack at will. And it doesn't take much. It really doesn't. It just takes a car,
If you have access, I suppose, that kind of weaponry, you don't need state sponsorship anymore because you can access it yourself. Producer Will has said that that jet fragments, they were pictured in the village of Wuyan, which is in India-administered Kashmir. So that is in Indian territory, as India says. That's where Pakistan. India says Pakistan shot down its jets over its own territory. Of course, Pakistan argues that all of Kashmir is not Indian territory, so there'd probably be some kind of dispute about that. There doesn't seem to be an awful lot. If that's jet wreckage, which looks to be sitting on a pristine meadow of flowers and grass, I wonder whether a plane really crashed in that spot. I would like to see the crater. If there is one. Will could be doing that while we're discussing the next stuff. But getting back to Israel quickly before we move on to Ukraine. Obviously, Netanyahu's got this situation with his government. There's a lot of extremists in there. He's holding together a very loose coalition. And he's, like you say, he's got his own problems. But now they're threatening to empty Gaza of its people. And of course, Gaza exists because of a UN mandate. The United Nations said you can have Israel, Palestinians can have Gaza and the West Bank. That's the rule. If you start emptying it, surely the United Nations have to do something. But with Trump in the White House, is whatever the United Nations going to say going to make any difference?
Well, the question is the sort of answer, really, isn't it? All the way you asked it. Not really. Yeah. What's the expression they're using? Not enforced migration. It's got a hint of something. Yeah, it's got a hint of invitation to be trafficked abroad or whatever. I don't know what the expression is, but yeah, I not really. I don't know if even the Israelis know that they have a solution yet as to what to do with Gazans, whether they can have a future in Gaza. I mean, that place is, I forget the estimates now, but it's going to cost hundreds of billions of pounds over 20, 30 years to rebuild. By the way, it is pretty amazing how quickly places do change face. You can rebuild them. I've seen this in Iraq within 10 years that it's changed radically. Anyway, that doesn't give any hope for Palestinian people who are under pressure, not just from bombs every day, but facing the idea of being forced to go abroad. I think Netanyahu will not stop the war until he knows that every single member of Hamas is dead. And
but the war that he's waging is surely creating new members of Hamas
every
day.
Well, there will be people there will be kids, young boys of 12, 13 who now 3 years into the war probably knew nothing of how it started, or no, that would be naive to think that, but who are now of fighting age, who may be feeling, well, my dad and my brothers, my older brothers and my uncles have been killed. I'm not going to justify any prescribed terrorist outfit taking on new recruits who've lost their but nothing has been done to stop that relentless cycle. So no one is saying, let's stop the war, draw a line, arrest everyone who's involved on October the 7th. No one's saying that. None of Netanyahu's supporters are saying that. They're cheering him on. There is huge amount of support for what he's doing. There's also huge amounts of objection for what he's doing. I've got to say, a lot of this is more to do, I get the impression, with forcing the release of hostages, either by war or some sort of conciliation, than actual the welfare of the Palestinians. So even liberals in us, it's painful to mention this, but even liberal campaigners against Netanyahu will say to me, well, don't you understand why we're doing this? Look at what happened on October the 7th. It was so wounding, but the pictures from within Gaza that we're seeing are just truly horrific. I can't imagine how people, they would just sleep through exhaustion, wouldn't they, at night? And you
collapse at that point. But if you're living behind a sheet in a pile of rubble, which is what you saw
very
with
vulnerable
facilities or services, and tomatoes cost $10, then you're living hand to mouth and in a way that's more like the Stone Age than anything else. Now we need to turn on. So I think it's our third continent of the morning, and what's happening? Ukraine. Now, they finally signed this long-demanded minerals deal with the US last week. So Donald Trump demanded this as his price for organising the end of the war with Russia. So it's all over, is it, Chris?
Oh, gosh. I think the minerals deal was better for Ukraine because it might encourage more, the presence of Americans, not necessarily the military. As we've said before, Susie, does mean that Russia might be tempted not to go further with its war on Ukraine. No, I don't think so. I think what Zelensky's, I don't think we're anywhere near at the end of what's happening at the moment. Zelensky is playing an absolute blinder. He took a huge gamble with his very, very aggressive attacks, I think yesterday and the previous day, on targets within Russia, including Moscow, just to massively embarrass Putin on the virtual eve of Russia's VE Day. Now, don't forget, VE Day in Russia might mean something slightly different, because it no doubt they will harness this ridiculous narrative that in reality that the Kyiv, Western-leaning, fluffy liberal Kyiv is run by fascists, and that's what VE Day may symbolize there. Zelensky is also, someone in Zelensky's cabinet has also warned foreign dignitaries visiting Moscow this week for these celebrations, including China, India, and some other stands, that they go there at their own peril, making it very clear that Putin isn't a strong man. He cannot protect his own country, as proven many times by Ukraine, who in the last few days has launched another incursion into Kursk, an invasion of part of Russia for the second time, and elsewhere. I think so. I forgot the question, Susie, but I think you were asking, what is it the end of the war? No, and I think Zelensky has played a blinder because he feels emboldened. He can see that Putin is not handling Trump very well, and that he's also, I suspect, whilst doing all of this, he's having a look at Trump as well, and I think he's trying to rewrite, I hate this expression, the narrative that was believed in Trump's White House, that Ukraine has no cards, it's very vulnerable, and that Russia is all powerful. That is absolute nonsense. Ukraine can win. I believe, and many others do, that Ukraine can win this war. What that looks like, we'll have to get to that later. But it can win this war, and that Zelensky is saying to Trump and Putin, look what we can do. We may not even, this is all about leverage and getting a better deal for Ukrainians. And I think Trump is increasingly either being advised to or deciding himself to realize that that Putin has been playing him along. And any peace deal, you cannot believe it, even if it was signed in gold letters by Putin or anyone else in the Kremlin. I do not believe that we can take it seriously. It has to be done, and I hate to say it, by force.
Yeah. So what's happening here? I mean, is Trump turning away from Russia? Is he starting to realize he's been, all this time he spent talking to Putin on the phone, sending his envoy Steve Witkoff to all these talks, all this being reduced to begging Putin on social media to stop bombing? Yeah. Is he being ignored and he's starting to tumble to that? Or is it the fact that perhaps Zelensky, he's had so many red lines, no, we're not going to give up Ukraine. No, we need democracy. No, we need a ceasefire before talks can really start. Trump said, like you said, all this stuff was pointless. The man had no cards. But it seems that Zelensky's way of looking at things is actually what is becoming reality. Yeah. So is Trump coming around to that, or is Zelensky just being very stubborn?
Honestly, I think all of that, because Zelensky's got no choice. But as we've seen with Trump many times before, his rather infantile approach to pretty much anything that he discovers for himself means that if he's discovered it, it's the first time the world knows about it. So when he says, if anyone else who suddenly realizes that they've been played by this master manipulator, this former KGB manipulator, Putin, anyone who realized that, woke up and realized, oh my God, I've been played, would be so embarrassed. You wouldn't say it publicly and say, I'm beginning to think he may have, I forget the expression he used, but tipping me along. There's a better expression for that. Yeah. He's absolutely shafted you. And I think it's almost like when he discovers that may be the case, his genius is shining through. He's got a very bizarre way of looking at things, and nevertheless, he's here for a while. And I think if he's beginning to realize, as you say, that if he's turning away from Putin, that's all good, and there is evidence of that. There again, he could turn back again. There is no doubt that he admires this strong. That's another thing. If Putin's strongman image finally goes, then perhaps the scales will fall further from Trump's eyes. I don't know.
Well, speaking of strong men, And I'd love to know what people think was going on about the war in Ukraine. Do you think Trump is trying to actually figure things out? Do you think he's going to help at all, or is he being ignored by Russia and is starting to be humiliated? Serhi says, stop the Russian war in Ukraine. Yes, that would be nice, wouldn't it? It doesn't seem that we're anywhere near it. Little Lefty Lucy says, don't just blame Trump. Starmer is standing by and allowing all this with support from the RAF and continuing arms sales. I think she's talking about the Gaza conflict there. There's a lot going on everywhere. But again, I would say that because Trump's supporting one side or another, Britain tends to come along in the backwash as well. Although we don't sell a lot of arms to Israel, we sell enough, I think. Now, Russia's war effort, as you were saying, Chris, it's not that good. It's not been doing as well. We keep hearing Russia's winning the war, but you explained in the paper today, North Korea is sending them another 15,000 people, having already sent them 12,000, which presumably have been killed already. They've sent another 15,000, which of course is more. How can it possibly be winning the war if it needs these supplements from overseas to keep the fighting going
on? I don't know what these 15. So there are 15,000 more North Korean, I think they're men, being taken on by Russia to go to Russia's Far East to work on its industrial base. I read somewhere that this may be something to do with military manufacture of weapons, or I'm not sure, but they're very bad conditions, virtual slaves, very poorly paid. So whoever the gang bosses are in the Far East of Russia that run these places, they'll be very pleased to see North Koreans who apparently have a reputation for not complaining because they're just glad to get a bite to eat and get some proper work done. So the reason for this is that Russia, there are many reasons, but the main one is that Russia's lost so many young men and middle-aged men in the war in Ukraine, close to almost a million dead or wounded to various degrees of incapacity. And not just that, I think several million have fled, a million or 100, yeah, quite a few young men have fled.
There's been an exodus, hasn't there, from Russia?
Yeah, there has. And also, there's that, and also there's been a birth rate problem. So demographically, Russia's time to have a war was a few years ago when it started the war in Ukraine. It's running out very, very quickly of resources. So there is no one left in the factories. So, I think we'll see more and more of this from North Korea.
Yeah, so you've got, because of this lack of people in the factories, you've got wages going up, you have inflation, you have an economy which is more and more dependent upon having a war. Which is sort of supplying a lot of the jobs that you do have. If you don't have a war, if you suddenly achieve peace at some point, then, the economy collapses and then Putin's in real trouble at home. So it's kind of like Netanyahu in a way. He has to sort of trying to keep going along with this. Now, so I suppose the question to end it all is you've got all these strong men trying to be strong. And it's always men, isn't it? Around the world. And I think it's easy to say that they're being emboldened by the fact that there is a strong man who apparently likes strong men in the White House suddenly. I mean, M on Twitter says, goodness gracious me, he does have a foreign policy. Trump does have a foreign policy. It's just not what you want it to be. And it's based on a medium to long-term goal. So you can't judge it by the short term. I mean, all these conflicts have been ongoing for quite a while. They're not new. They can't blame the fact they exist on Trump or anyone else. But how much of this uptick, Chris, that we're seeing in conflict, or we seem to be seeing, how much of this uptick that we're now witnessing is to do with the fact that the world police is now run by a sheriff called Donald Trump? Joe Biden wanted to pull out of every foreign conflict, didn't he? But Trump seems to want one side to win.
It's going to be fascinating to see. Yeah, it'll be fascinating to see, Susie, how Trump apportions blame for what's happening between India and Pakistan. What's still happening in Gaza, what's still happening in Ukraine, despite the fact he keeps claiming that within a day, he kept claiming that within a day he will stop the war. Something interesting happened the other day that I thought, which was that so Putin demanded a 3-day ceasefire so that his VE Day could not be attacked. Zelensky dismissed it, and Trump simply said, now, given that this is the US president who said he'd stop all wars within a day, and Trump said, well, 3 days, he said something like, it's something, isn't it? 3 days, So So and now we have the threat of a major flare up between India and Pakistan, and then his intervention last night simply, oh, I think it's disgraceful, I hope it stops. I mean, he's not a statesman, is he?
No, he's not. But I think, there's just this suggestion, I suppose, that having someone who is quite good at bullying in the White House and who is quite good at rewriting history as well kind of means that other people around the world can use that and exploit it and go, well, this is the time to do this, do that, or unleash that and try and grab another little bit of land or advantage somewhere, and that there isn't anyone there to stop them. I mean, we did see some of that under Biden. Like I said, he was pulling out of everywhere, but Trump seems to be allowing the aggressors, in a way, perhaps even accidentally, but allowing those aggressors to be a bit more aggressive when they want to. Gosh, when's it all going to end? Maybe, who knows? We're only 108 days in to the Trump presidency, another 1,300 or so to go. And then we'll have to see who comes in afterwards, won't we? But like I said, maybe we should all just get a blimmin' vote next time, America, if you're listening. Now, we have managed to find some good news in the world for you. And by God, today we really need it. Now, here it is. Now, we've had a lot of war talk this morning, so it's very apt, perhaps, that our good news relates to a lady who was smuggled out of wartime Austria to Britain, along with her favourite doll. Now, Ruth Hayter was born to a Catholic mum and a Jewish father, teenagers, and she was adopted in Vienna. But when war broke out, her adoptive family feared they'd all be jailed for having a Jewish child in their home. So they arranged for her to be smuggled to safety in the UK. And she brought with her just one thing, her doll, Hasey. Now, 88 years young, living in Brighton, Ruth took her rather worn and cracked doll to the BBC show The Repair Shop to be fixed up for its VE Day special, which airs tonight on BBC One. And they restored the doll's sort of shattered limbs, even gave her a new Austrian dress. Ruth said it really mattered to her because the doll had gone through life with her. She's kept it safe all this time. Chris, is this proof that, even out of war, there can often be something good we can hold on to?
Crikey, just look at her though, Susie. I mean, doesn't she look great at 88? I mean, that the things that she's had to put up with in her life, and she had that doll all her life, didn't she? With her, and it does make you think. What would you grab if you had to grab something if you were fleeing a situation like that? No, it's great, and it's great to see her looking so well and healthy, and I think I will even try and tune in. It's on tonight, isn't it? I think
on tonight. It's the Repair Shop on BBC One. I think about something. And it's
how much of the doll is original? We were saying earlier. I mean, but no, let's not ruin it. It's not Trigger's broom, is it?
No, exactly. I had a doll very similar to that my Danish grandmother gave me, but I think it's been lost some time ago, which makes me very sad now. But she's, there's a VE Day special today, so I'm sure there are several sort of survivors of war and veterans and stuff bringing in special items to be restored. So it's worth having a look at that maybe later on. Thank you very much, Chris, for taking us through all this. I don't think we'll put you in the rota for a while. Just try and give the world a break from war and conflict. If you want to get in touch, let me know. We'll see you all again on Monday for another edition of the News Agenda. Until then, everybody, stay safe, take care, tat and bye.
Bye-bye.